welcome to This Month in Security, a DevCentral podcast featuring contributions from Aaron Brailsford.
You know, it is relatively easy to breach an organization because usually soft, fleshy things.
Malcolm Heath.
Just from a basic sort of security perspective, it's better to fix things earlier than later. It's better to structure your architecture and stuff that it's in such a way that it's secure rather than trying to bolt security on at the back end.
David Warburton.
What really fascinates me from a security point of view, now I like to kind of get geeky about crypto stuff and all the latest technologies, but actually so much of security, like probably the most pivotal part of security is trust.
And many more. I'm your host, Aubrey King, and we've got a great show for you this month. So strap on those earbuds and get ready for This Month in Security. All right, fantastic. Hello, community. How you doing? Happy March episode, I guess. It's great to not actually see all of you again. I hope everyone enjoyed the brand new opener for the show that I had to do, unfortunately, because we are minus a member from the show now. So we want to make sure that we wish Sander Vinberg the best in his new endeavors. Hopefully everything's going great, and I'm sure we'll see you out there in the community and talk to you on LinkedIn, where everybody seems to talk. We got a great show, of course, even without Sandra here, right? We're going to have Malcolm and Dave are going to join Aaron on the roundtable. And also we had this thing called App World that happened this past month. So if you missed App World in San Jose, it was a fantastic app delivery and security conference that F5 put together. And I ended up not just speaking at it. I did an AI talk there from my OWASP affiliation, but I also ran into a couple other people that I've been chatting with here and there. So Dan Barahona and Corey Ball, both from APISec University. They were out there talking to Cameron Delano about some API use cases and some of the courseware that's going on at APISec University. So APISec, right? That's how they say it. So now I used to say APISec, but just in case you hear it in the show this month, APISec University is typically how they say it. So I think before we kick off, before we get into the API roundtable, which is very AI focused, and the standard This Month in Security roundtable, which I didn't think was very AI focused. It would surprise me if there wasn't AI stuff in there. I'm going to get into something else that I talked with Dan about. That's the 2024 API Security Market Report that was done by APISec University. They wanted to just kind of get an idea about some of the trends in the market space and put those out there so that everybody could, make some gain from it. That's what community is all about. So without further ado, the 2024 API Security Market Report. So we were chatting the other day, and you mentioned a really great piece of API security news, I think, right? There was pretty recently, you guys did an API security market report, yes?
Yeah, that's right. Something we've thought about for a long time. Like, at APISec University, we've had this tremendous, adoption and a community growth. We're at 75,000 people now. And we thought, geez, how do we tap into this collective wisdom and start, getting a pulse on the state of API security? So we thought, why don't we just ask? And that was the inspiration behind making the report.
Well, I think that's a great piece of security research. You and I have talked about the importance of understanding your APIs right now and things like that in the past when we were at App World a month or so ago. So I'll pull up the report actually, and maybe we can kind of go through some of the highlights, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And while that's pulling up, let me just share a little bit about what we actually got back, right? So we sent this survey out to our community, and we ended up with about 2,000 total responses, which was really great. We see lots of surveys and market reports and all this kind of thing, but you always always feel a little vendor tinged, like
I do.
the questions are worded in a certain way, or you're only targeting a certain type of user. So we're really proud of this report because it's really just straight from the community, right? We didn't hand select people. These are people that have shown a level of interest in API security through their enrollment in our courses and the like. So getting 2,000 responses felt really great. And so we took that and we analyzed it, and then we decided to do a bit of our own research as well. So we analyzed about 50 different high-profile public API breaches, and really tried to answer the question, like, what's going on here? Like, what happened in each one of these breaches, and can we see some common threads? So that's what you'll find here in the report.
Yeah. So I guess can you step me through this a little bit?
Probably the most incredible finding was the commonalities, the patterns that exist amongst all these breaches that we saw, right? So we took all those breaches and we mapped them against the OWASP API top 10. And we tried to see, like, did any stand out? And you know what? OWASP 1, 2, and 3, not coincidentally, turned out to be responsible for 90% of the breaches. 90%. And what are those? Broken authorization. Can Dan access Aubrey's records? Broken authentication. Not even broken, but frankly, door left wide open, right? No authentication, absence of authentication. That was number 2. And then number 3, excess data exposure, APIs that are returning way too much information. So those 3 things turned out to be present in 90% of these breaches. And what was sort of remarkable was the number 1 issue ahead of those was rate limiting. Oh. And, whenever you see 1 million records, 10 million records, 100 million records being harvested, you got to think there's some sort of rate limiting issue at play here as well, right? But to me, that's not the root cause, right? That's what makes the root cause worse, right? But the root cause is you have APIs with something valuable, right? And that's what OWASP 1, 2, and 3 were identifying here.
Okay.
And so, yeah, some of the other things that jumped out here. So there you have a list of some of the companies, some of the breaches that we actually examined and analyzed. And further down, you'll see a lot of questions about what kind of vulnerabilities have you experienced? What are your main challenges? What kinds of gaps, are preventing you from having better security? And the interesting thing on the security gap, right, or the main challenges, the number 1 issue was skills, right, which is sort of a common thread. We've heard this quite a lot, right? But I think in the area of API security, it's even more pronounced, right? This is a new area. It's an area that isn't as well understood. The technologies are still evolving. And getting people who really understand how to do API security, that showed up really prominently in the findings here as well.
That was something that frequently kind of was in part when I was in sales, was in a bunch of my my conversations with the engineers that I worked with. It was really great to me that these people that worked with our gear were actually keyed into API security fairly early on.
Well, and it's, it makes a lot of sense, right? And we do a lot of workshops for people where we, spend an hour educating the dev team, the sec team about API risks. And one of the things we always make a point is say, listen, go talk to your WAF provider, right? Because they've added a lot of functionality. Like, you guys have, especially at F5, have done some really cool things. You might not even know all the capabilities that you have available, and it's certainly, we're seeing it here adopted and embedded into these WAF technologies.
Yeah, it's pre-production API testing. That's another one. I remember talking to lots of customers about, hey, get your QA needs to be a thing, right? You need to make sure that API security is a piece of that QA as well. This one really stood out a lot. Testing in general came up a lot in the report. A lot of people are saying, well, what's the problem? Don't we QA test that? The reality is APIs are hard to test by hand. It's not like, clicking around on the UI, right? You got to write code for every test scenario. And most organizations still kind of rely on, their annual pen test or something like that.
Meanwhile, they're releasing code, 52 times a year or 300 times a year. That's a lot of code that's not getting tested, right? So we got to bring some automation into our API testing.
The funny thing though, we end up seeing a lot of what they call shadow APIs, that are just so it maybe the new functionality is in the QA tests, but what about the functionality you need to deprecate? Are you making sure that the things that shouldn't work also don't work? That's a huge
That's
part.
right. And do you even know all these APIs that exist, right? And there you go. Like your WAF is already sitting there watching the traffic, right? And it's got the ability to sniff out those APIs. So go find them. This graphic here, we asked folks like where do they want to protect their APIs? It's classic shift left versus shield right. Of course, you need them both, right? That's the reality here, but we're definitely seeing a trend towards like how can we find things earlier, and I think that's a reflection of where's the gap more than anything.
And this is something that I see quite frequently, and actually I've been doing a bit of research on some of your courseware. This is huge, right? 3 pillars of API security.
It's a very simple framework that we came up with a couple of years ago. Governance, testing, monitoring, and it seems to work.
Well, I think this is absolutely fantastic, man. I mean, I don't want to give it all away because we want people to actually go to, APISec University's website and go ahead and download your own copy of this. Like, really, there's a ton of valuable data if you're currently securing APIs in your organization.
Please do. It's you can find the link at APISecUniversity.com. It's free to download. Hopefully you'll come check it out and get some value out of it.
Now, before I let you go, actually, Dan, I wanted to also ask you a little bit about something else that we've been talking about here, and that is APISecCon.
We decided to bite the bullet and host our own event. So we're calling it APISecCon. You can find it at APISecCon.com or linked from APISecUniversity.com. With the community of the size we've got, we thought, no, maybe we could pull this thing off. So it's on May 22nd. It's all virtual, so anybody can attend from wherever they are, and it's all free, right? Anybody, it's accessible to everybody. What's really cool is kind of went around and asked all the sharpest and brightest minds, you included, Aubrey, if they'd be willing to present, and everyone said yes. So we've got about 30 speakers over this 8-hour conference, and it's going to be phenomenal. So definitely please come sign up, come check it out. It's all free. There's no sponsors, vendors, expos, or any of that stuff. It's just really great content.
Well, I'm definitely excited to be part of that for sure. Can't wait to take part in it, and also, can't wait to see you in the other segment on This Month in Security coming up, where we talked with Corey as well. So,
can't wait for that.
Well, thanks for coming on again, Dan, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to take a break from the APISec U guys, and we're going to head back to our guys, right? Aaron and David and Malcolm for the monthly roundtable.
Thanks, Aubrey. And you're right, we're going from APISec U and AI and APIs to the news, which is going to be AI and APIs. So it's totally different. So as usual, Malcolm and Dave with us this month to run through just, I think, 4 or 5 maybe interesting things that have been in the news this month. And the first one on AI is the Morris 2 worm, which is an AI worm. And when I first read this, I thought of all of the other articles that I've read about having AI create worms for you, right? But this is not that. This is a worm that exploits AI, specifically exploits AI assistants that people might be using to help manage their email or documents or anything else on their PC. And this is proof of concept, which I thought was an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, we've spoken so much. I mean, like the whole industry and just on previous shows here about the use of AI, and everyone's kind of been looking at the ways that AI can be used to, as you say, kind of create malicious code. It could be code to kind of attack sites. It could be creating, more genuine sounding phishing prompts, even creating profiles. This is definitely the first. We've even seen things on previous sessions, previous segments we've covered about things like LLM leaks and kind of getting data out, data exposure from Gen AI models. This is definitely the first time I've heard anything about self-replicating worms. It's almost like there's no limit to the possible nefarious uses of AI.
Yeah, and it's the worm using the AI assistant to both compromise the device, to replicate itself, and do anything else it feels like. So, like exfiltrate data out of someone's email. That's pretty powerful. The article talks about zero-click install. There, you send, essentially, you could say send someone an email that causes the AI assistant reading your email to take action to install the worm, which should be mildly terrifying to all of us, I suspect.
To be fair for anyone that doesn't really know, I think if I understand this correctly, this isn't something that can go natively attack the likes of ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, right? This isn't something you can kind of just go log on to the chat service through the search service and just execute this prompt and have it do stuff. You are right thinking, Aaron, that you need essentially an agent, you need something in your environment that already has permission to access your data and do stuff on your behalf. So you already need to have taken that step to put the agent inside your kind of environment or your system.
Yeah, it's zero click, assuming that you have the AI agent already managing your email, or whatever the input is that is going to be the route to install this worm. And I don't know how widely deployed those kind of agents are yet, but I can only assume that they're going to be widely adopted pretty quickly. I don't know if anybody else has used them or tested them.
I've done a little. I mean, go ahead, Malcolm.
Oh yeah, I've done a little bit. I think that the two things that I guess I want to point out is, one, like an email assistant AI is actually tremendously useful. You can, in my case, I might want to send an email to Dave talking about my work life, for example, and I might run it through an AI to make sure that it's professional and not filled with swear words or something like that. It can actually be really, really good to make sure that you're matching the right tone, that you're, that it's going to be an effective email for the context that you're in. And I think people are really going to want to leverage that, especially people who maybe aren't native speakers of whatever the language is that you're using. It can be tremendously helpful. So I expect a great deal of adoption, but I'd also like to point out that what I'm seeing just in general is increasingly companies that are doing these sort of products, and the specific example that I'm thinking of is not an email assistant, but is a AI powered search. Google rolled out an AI powered search, which they had an opt-in for. They've just now started sort of pushing that out to a limited set of users who didn't opt in, and for sort of testing purposes, I guess. But what I'm curious about is, at what point does any given company with an AI assistant for whatever technology just make it the default, right?
Well, we're seeing that, aren't we? I mean,
Right.
with Microsoft Windows 11, I mean, we're kind of almost shielded with the kind of corporate builds, the corporate machines. There's the rate at which IT kind of accept new features and push things out is fairly slow. But my home computer, there's no AI everywhere across Windows 11. And it is, to your point, Malcolm, it's pretty much on by default. I mean, granted, in most cases, you have to click the button to get it to do something, but it's there and it's ready to be used instantly.
Yeah. So this kind of thing that we're talking about, I don't know. I don't know exactly the right way to think about it, but whenever you hand over a certain degree of action or trust to a component, that's going to become part of your attack surface. Absolutely, right. So, as maybe a very old school example would be, well, it used to be that emails were all text. At some point, we handed it over and said, okay, yeah, you can render images, or you can parse HTML, or whatever, and that did open up a bunch of attack surfaces, right? So similar,
Do you know,
perhaps.
you kind of raise a really interesting point there, Malcolm, because what I find kind of really fascinating about this is, as the researchers kind of describe it, it's a new take on an age-old problem, that of interpretation, where a bit of code, a machine or system has to interpret the actions of the user. User could be a programmer, coder, or it could be an average everyday user, but it kind of isn't. So things like SQL injection, embedding malware into PDFs, it's all to do with interpretation. How do you interpret this thing and essentially make a best guess at, oh, this should be an image, this should be a bit of code, this should be allowed, this shouldn't be allowed. This is another example of like interpretation going wrong. But what's fascinating is that, it doesn't have to generate code as such. It's just generating English or other kind of natural language, which is supposed to be seen in email. Had it been spitting out malicious looking code, Python or SQL commands, you could quite easily see that could be easily flagged and dropped and blocked and so on. But when it's just creating text, that's, again, because of the way that AI is kind of interpreting it, it's terrifying, really. It's kind of, I've heard a lot of people kind of muse about how do you even begin to prevent this kind of thing. I mean, this is obviously just a proof of concept. Thankfully, the researchers didn't release into the wild as they did Quanaltech many years ago with Morris 1. But it's kind of inevitable that this is going to happen, probably sooner rather than later, and it's not yet obvious what technology or processes you could have in place to stop this.
Well, I will say that the link does include a link to their GitHub, which does contain code that they use.
So countdown to live exploits. Yeah,
I mean, it's that the fact that the exploit vector is just natural. This is essentially natural language. It's stuff that you expect to see on your network. This isn't like I don't know, filtering binaries or stopping people from executing, downloading and executing executables that you haven't whitelisted on a corporate PC, or making sure people aren't uploading data to an FTP site or downloading data from somewhere suspicious. This could be natural language text contained in emails that you expect your staff to receive emails, weirdly enough, and Teams messages and Slack messages and 1,000 other things. But, you expect emails.
Yeah.
How do you filter this stuff?
Well, exactly. And, this is just an example. Rather, this is just a kind of proof of concept using email as an example, right? There are all these systems that are no doubt in the works, in the brains of some very clever architects and people thinking up new solutions. All these ways in which AI could, in theory, be automatically conversing with each other. And I think that's obviously the key, right? Is that you can't have that human break. If there is a human break, to Malcolm's example about kind of automatically or using AI in email, that kind of thought terrifies me. I love the idea of using it to help me format and check for things, maybe summarize a lengthy incoming email. But the idea of it automatically replying and doing something is terrifying. But it will no doubt happen, I'm sure. And so you will end up getting more and more systems, not just email-based Gen AI, but other systems that are kind of naturally and automatically talking to each other. So the really scary thing is it's almost like the sky's the limit. You possibly can't even imagine the potential kind of destruction that we can have when we have more and more different types of Gen AI systems being brought online and allowed to just converse with each other.
Yeah. Actually, you just made me think of, sorry, Malcolm, I cut you off.
No, please. No, I think we're going to the same place. So let's see.
Well, so you made me think of something I read the other day about, and it's not specific to the Morris 2 worm at all, but you said, use AI to summarize an email that you get that's maybe lengthy and you want the Cliff Notes version, right? And I saw someone posit the fact that people are already using AI to take a simple concept and write a long email from it. Like, I want to get across this topic. Please now construct me the 4 paragraph. They send that to someone, and then someone asks another LLM to give them the synopsis of that email. And we introduced a bunch of unnecessary steps, like make me seem wordy so that I sound more intelligent. The receiving end goes, now please make this intelligible.
Yep. It's somewhat. It seems somewhat inevitable, and quite a sad, pessimistic look at the future, to be honest with you, because it is like just removing humans. And eventually, the dystopian view of it is just AI talking to AI, and hopefully we're all sat on the beach enjoying our lives and not being plugged into the matrix. But if you let yourself kind of go, think of all the possibilities. It's scary to think of all the different ways that this could potentially affect like very real human like our lives. You could have systems that are talking about healthcare, or affecting the way our cars drive, or who knows what. So very scary.
There is a obviously rich amount of space for thinking about this stuff. I mean, I to Aaron's example, I'm kind of astounded that we may be entering into a period where sort of the things that we assume about the way humans communicate with each other are starting to be called into question, or how does this affect sort of our understanding of what knowledge is, big philosophical things. But I would also like to point out, and maybe this might be a good segue to the next topic, if you have systems talking to each other, and they're responding to each other, you have a very interesting situation where maybe you can get them to keep doing that forever at ever increasing speeds. So I'm now kind of waiting for the first AI to AI DDoS, or maybe not even a DDoS. I guess it would just be a DOS. But yeah, I know I've seen some remarkably funny examples online of people who have configured autoresponders to reply to autoresponders, and thus, in one particular case, every time you sent an email to this particular thing, it would create a ticket, send an auto reply. So the fellow wrote an auto replier to reply to the auto reply, which would create another ticket. And so he ended up with, several 100,000 or millions of tickets on this ticketing system. So hey, maybe somebody out there can come up with a good way to get LLMs to do something similar with each other. I don't know.
That would be an interesting attack. I mean, the Morris 2 talks, or rather the article about it talks a little bit about self-replicating prompts, right? Adversarial self-replicating prompts. So a prompt that causes the AI model to output another prompt, which presumably it then ingests. Yeah, do that between two systems, and you could consume vast amounts of resources, because AI is not cheap in compute or energy, or that's an interesting attack vector, which I am sure we will see at some point. You're right. It's a good segue into the next topic, which was loop DOS. So this was in the news, a few days ago, probably. What are we? On the 19th of March, so a week or so ago. And I saw headlines like, 300,000 devices worldwide vulnerable to novel and new attack technique and things like that. And when you dig into what loop DOS is, it's a research paper that describes, my hot take on this, it's a research paper that describes something that was described in the 90s. And it basically kind of amounts to UDP is vulnerable to IP spoofing, right? There's no three-way handshake in UDP communications. So an attacker can set the source IP on their packet to be a target victim, send UDP data to another victim, and have that victim respond to their ultimate victim, which is what we've seen in, DNS amplification attacks. Any UDP amplification attack relies on exactly that vector. But what the research sort of that built on that, if you like, in this research paper, is that certain protocols and certain implementations of those protocols were vulnerable to exactly what we were just talking about. You, as the attacker, send packet to victim A, who responds to victim B, which causes victim B to respond to victim A, who responds to victim B. Rinse and repeat, ad forever, basically. Like I say, my hot take on this was, did we not talk about this in the 90s? But I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on this, if you've read any about it.
I'm kind of, I was really fascinated by this, because to me it felt a little bit new, like a newer take on what we do see quite a lot, but I wasn't too familiar with the fact that this exact scenario was kind of described 20 years ago. So the reports we've been putting out, the DDoS reports from F5 Labs for years, we'll commonly see UDP around about 75 to 80% of all attack vectors will use UDP. Not all of those are reflection of volumetric-based attacks. Sometimes they're application-based, so they're genuine kind of DNS, NX domain kind of queries. But UDP features heavily, and as you said, Aaron, the big reason for that is IP spoofing. But typically, in all the kind of different types of botnet attacks that we've seen that launch UDP-based attacks, the attackers still need to have a botnet. They need to have zombies. They need to have devices that are compromised to send that traffic. And typically, they'll then spoof the source IP address so it doesn't they don't get blocked or it doesn't come back. So what was new for me, at least, in reading about LoopDOS, was you don't potentially need that massive botnet. You don't need an army of zombies to kind of create the traffic. You could just have two systems, or presumably half a dozen or a dozen systems, like a very small number, that are attacking themselves. So you don't need that wider kind of botnet, army, if you like, under your control. Do you think that's a fair summary? Do you have a different kind of take on it?
Yeah, I don't want to trample all over the research. This is kind of novel. It's not novel in that we did describe basically this in 1996, but and there's an old CERT advisory from 1996 that describes this problem, but that was specific to, I think, the ChargeN and Echo protocols. And these researchers found legitimate problems in the modern implementations of modern protocols like DNS, NTP, and TFTP that old advisory didn't talk about. It kind of, it stands to reason that the problem could exist. And I'm actually surprised that we haven't seen this, or at least maybe we weren't looking right, but that we haven't seen this abused already. Right? We see. Sorry,
you just make a good point. How do you detect this, right? But the one thing that kind of got me thinking is that would this not be fairly trivial to block? Because to get this loop effect, you spoof, you forge the original source address of the original UDP packet to be victim B, if you like, so that victim A responds to victim B. But then the IP can't change then, surely, because that's what creates the loop. So at that point, it just becomes a fairly simple IP block, presumably.
Yeah, I think the fact is that you could be using legitimate IPs that you might actually want to communicate with, or at least you could. If you take the example of DNS and TFTP, I think those CVEs were assigned for those, and that specific vector has been fixed. Now that assumes everybody is patched and up to date, which we all know is extremely unlikely. The ways, so I was thinking, if you imagine the first packet that comes in as a spoofed source IP, and then so that is different from the ensuing communications between the two hosts that you wanted as your victims. There should be things, or there are most likely things that you can see, like the number of hops between you and the incoming packet that started this, and victim A and victim B when they're just talking. Otherwise, you're right. You can treat this like any other DOS. If you see a storm of packets, your options are basically dropping them in some way, right? So whether that's, like the DOS protection that is built into Big IP AFM, you're just looking at packet rates and going, this host is violating the packet rate, therefore I want to cut it off. But if the victim A and victim B were legitimate systems that you would normally talk to, that would be a problem, right? You can't just stop talking to, I don't know, maybe your other DNS server in your own network.
That's a very good point. I wonder, if it could be used to create a kind of not continual kind of penetration deeper within the network, but exactly to your point, Aaron, if you manage to create, spoof the source IP such that it's the victim A, the first victim, is then talking to a server deeper into the network, that actually could potentially be quite sort of damaging. They were still talking DOS, it's not potentially exfiltrating data or what have you, but still a quite novel approach, actually. It'd be interesting to see. We're actually wrapping up some of the work at the moment, and I think one of the things that's going to be, we're already being asked in the data we're looking at, kind of in the analysis, are there any signs of loot DOS? And it's hard to tell, right? Because it's just another UDP-based attack. It's going to be very, very difficult without kind of logging every single client IP and source to kind of track whether it's loot DOS or not. It's going to be quite difficult, I think, potentially for everyone to kind of spot whether this is actually being used in the wild.
Yeah, I think the most damage I could see this doing would be, I don't know, take a service provider network where they have many DNS servers, make them all talk to each other, right? Because, I mean, what do? There's their own systems talking to one another. And these systems are sized and scaled to deal with thousands or millions of queries, so they can do a lot of talking before they fall over and saturate links and all sorts of stuff. And it'll be really hard to understand, how did this start? What was the trigger for this? Was the trigger for this something malicious, or I don't know, did we accidentally create some kind of loop in our network? Because that happens a lot.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I don't need to tell you this, Aaron. I mean, I'm sure you see this all the time on the F5 cert, but the number of times that when I was on that team that we had a customer call up who was like, we are definitely under a denial of service attack, and it turned out to be a routing loop, was large, honestly. Obviously you handle it the same way. You try to figure out what's going on. You take a bunch of network captures, you figure it out. And then you say, yeah, it looks like, this router and this router are just going nuts. So maybe you should check that out. But it makes me wonder, and you brought this up actually when we were chatting earlier, Aaron. There are ways to prevent or at least somewhat mitigate IP spoofing, right? At the internet level, that we seem to be somehow reticent to implement.
Yeah, BCP38, right? That we've been talking about for 30 years? I forget when let's look it up. When it 24 years.
Yeah.
And still it's got the slowest adoption next to IPv6, I think.
Yeah.
But you're right. If we filtered an ingress, if all networks filtered an ingress, and then we're like, well, I don't expect to see traffic from that network because I'm not connected to it, IP spoofing would go away overnight and solve all of these problems. But I think the reality is that the people running those networks, all of the networks that interconnect the internet, nobody wants to be the one who starts accidentally dropping traffic if they can help it. Because people get upset when the internet stops working because we rely on it completely. And it makes everybody thoroughly risk averse to changes like implementing BCP38, even if we should have done it a long time ago.
Well, and understandably and quite rightly so, I suppose. But whenever this sort of thing comes up, I always think of that. And I always say, is there some way that we can all get on the same page about it? The economic incentives may not align, but I guess.
What's the quote about, an attack is an incentivizing event. One day there will be one big enough and catastrophic enough that everybody will be forced to implement BCP38 is
Perhaps,
my guess.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to still be working in the industry when that happens, but one day.
I think I frequently have referred to, big internet-wide events like Code Red and MDub. I mean, that shows my age, but events similar to that as, security budget funding events, right? It's it suddenly becomes, this is actually something that we need to care about. Maybe. Perhaps, but I actually want to give a shout out to the researchers. I think that there's still a ton of really interesting things to discover within sort of the basics in terms of networking that we haven't yet found yet. So kudos to them for doing something pretty interesting, even though it's maybe at the root level something that we've known about for a long time. The continuing research on this is great.
Yeah. I think it was good. It's good to highlight it. I think my bigger problem is maybe the headlines it made and the sort of the panic and hysteria it causes, when really, this problem's existed for a long time. If maybe don't panic just yet.
Did it have a catchy name like LoopDOS 20 years ago?
No, it did not. We didn't believe in catchy names 20 years ago. So moving on from LoopDOS, which, as Dave, you said earlier, typically UDP attacks would be caused by botnets that are rented out. F5 Labs has its 2024 Bad Bots Review article out. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a few stats, I should say, to kind of share with everyone, and would obviously encourage everyone to go and read the full thing online. There's loads more than I've got time to go into today. But at a super high level, we've taken data from about 160 customers over the course of a year. This is customers of the F5 XE bot defense. Now, for those that know us in Labs, we don't kind of ever talk about the promotion or use of solutions, but we're very happy to kind of take all the data, because for us, it's a fascinating kind of insight into the real world attacks and what's going on. So we've looked at 160 customers, all the unwanted automation and bots that kind of hits all those customers across a variety of sectors and industries across many different countries across the world. And the insight's really fascinating. So what we found is a huge disparity in the amount of automation that each industry gets, depending on whether it's web-based or kind of mobile API-based and what kind of sector they're in. Everything from a tiny 0.2% of all traffic being automated against mobile insurance APIs, all the way through to 42%, almost 43% hitting healthcare web apps. So there's a massive disparity. Typically, what we're seeing is that websites, web apps receive a lot more unwanted automation and bot traffic than their mobile counterparts, with one exception, and that's the entertainment industry. And I might come back onto that in a moment if I have time. But we see a huge amount of traffic hitting those. Now, when we talk about unwanted automation, what do we mean? Especially in light of talking about bots with regards to DDoS. Now, they may well be, and can be in some cases, the same zombies, the same bots that launch these kind of attacks. But the Bad Bot Review that we've published typically focuses on a few different flows that these automation and kind of web bots that have what they're targeting. There's an awful lot of kind of identity and account abuse and misuse. So many of the attacks that we're seeing are looking to kind of perform account takeover or create new accounts for fraudulent purposes. They're trying to take over accounts to either extract funds, manipulate maybe gift card balances, or some other way try and log into a genuine customer's account for any given website. There are plenty of other things, trying to cash out gift cards, maybe create some other kind of fraudulent flow, but that's the kind of bot we're talking about. They're essentially interacting with the website or API in a very genuine way, the way that the website's been designed to do. It's just unwanted. These organizations don't want there to be, they're having their website scraped, having intellectual property stolen, accounts abused, and gift cards stolen, and so on. So as I said, the vast majority of traffic is hitting healthcare. So healthcare have got about 42% of all their traffic is unwanted automation on the web. Now that goes down to a fairly small 2 or 3% against mobile APIs. Looking at the entertainment industry, by contrast, only about sort of 8-9% of their web traffic is malicious automation, but that's contrasted with a 35% amount of malicious automation against the mobile APIs. Now that's a huge disparity, and you kind of have to ask yourself, why is there such a difference in the amount of automated traffic? And there tend to be a few different reasons that can affect why different industries have a different amount of automated traffic. One is value. Now, it might sound fairly obvious. From an attacking point of view, what's the potential benefit? What's the potential value for a threat actor or malicious user orchestrating a bot and then trying to get something out of the victim kind of website? So quite often here, it's things like money is an obvious one. Can they log into account and perform a fraudulent transaction to their attacker-controlled accounts to actually get hands on essentially cash? However, store cards and gift cards are another top target. We wouldn't believe actually some of the pages that related to gift cards, just purely by checking balances, are some of the most attacked pages that we see by bots, because attackers know that either through theft of gift card numbers or through iterating through numbers, they can very easily check to see if a gift card has any value left on it. And if so, they can spend some more time and effort attacking that one particular account to steal values. But things like airline miles and points are a huge kind of target for them as well. We have things like security and deterrence. So what kind of security controls are in place? How long have they been there? How much success has an attacker or botnet seen that industry before can have a big impact in terms of whether they'll attack it or not. And how much risk is there to attackers as well? What are the chances that the feds, the FBI, the police, whoever, Interpol, Europol will go after? In some industries, stealing, for example, someone's Netflix login, it's a crime, but it may not seek the same kind of justice that the insurance industry might do, because insurance fraud is a very serious crime that the likes of Interpol and FBI and so on will spend time going after. So they kind of weigh all this up, and it's very much kind of risk versus reward kind of conversation. We've seen some really fascinating kind of trends over the course of the 12 months. Again, healthcare seems to be a fairly top attack target throughout the kind of whole year. It peaked actually at 54% throughout the year. So actually over half of all healthcare customers' traffic was from malicious automation. That was typically web scrapers going after search page results. So typically trying to steal intellectual property, build out third-party proxy kind of search engines to farm users or get users from other healthcare providers. But hospitality, airline, travel, all those industries were massive targets as well. They were kind of typically targets 2 and 3 in the kind of tier list. And you do see a very significant trend between attacks ramping up in kind of April, May, at the start of the kind of summer holiday season for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere, and then kind of dropping sharply off around September, October. So we've seen those, occur quite a lot throughout the year, seeing those trends. Mobile API is really interesting. The one thing I think one of the last things I'll call out possibly before encouraging everyone again to go and read the full review online is when it comes to mitigation. So when controls are put in place to actually detect the bots, and again, for those that aren't too familiar, your typical network firewall, web app firewalls don't really do a lot because these are very genuine looking requests. They're not malicious. They're not embedding scripts like SQL injection or what have you. So once you put some kind of control in place to identify that this is a unwanted bit of automation or a bot, and then actually do something to block it, the converse is then the flip actually then happens. The majority of attack traffic of unwanted automation is then against web, not against mobile API. And this we kind of think is for a couple of reasons. The primary reason is that all web pages are different. And so for an attacker to kind of create a bot that targets a web page and a flow through a course of a web page, maybe creating an account, logging in, adding stuff to the basket, checking out, is very, very different from website to website. Whereas with a mobile API, any API essentially is very programmatic, is very consistent, it's normally very well documented and very easy to adapt. So if some controls are put in place and the bots are blocked, those that are targeting mobile APIs would typically give up fairly easily because they haven't invested too much time and effort. Those that have put time and serious money and resource into creating a bot that targets successfully a web app will spend longer trying to get around those controls and try and circumvent them once they're put in place. So again, it's been a really kind of fascinating look at the kind of trends that we've seen. We do kind of see ebbs and flows. I'd encourage anyone, because again, we look at all industries. So by all means, go and read the full article on the site. You can take a look at your industry, see how it compares to your peers, see how the kind of rates of automation fluctuate throughout the year, and start thinking about some of the things you can do to potentially just identify some of those bots. And it's fascinating, kind of looping back to the DDoS stories. I think CISA have got a new bit of DDoS kind of mitigation advice that's been put out fairly recently. And they kind of put in there, I think towards the end, they recommend the use of captures to help identify bots. For anyone that's heard us talk at F5 Labs or kind of read our content, you'll see that we talk quite extensively about captures and how ineffectual they are at blocking bots. Fantastic at blocking and irritating humans, not so much at the bots. So they are a hurdle, potentially, a very small hurdle, I would say. But I would definitely kind of, again, scour the website of F5 Labs to see other controls and general advice you have for detecting and blocking the bots.
Thanks, Dave. I must admit, I read that article. I read the Bad Bots report earlier, and I thought it was a really excellent piece of writing with some really interesting facts in it. A bunch of the things that you just said really resonated to me from dealing with customers under attack as well. The gift card enumeration. We've we've seen that before. We've seen the fact that people who've put time into web scraping, so going through a website, are generally determined. And sometimes they're scraping really odd stuff, the value of which was hard to discern at the time. But, I could surmise now. I can't, because it would give away what they were targeting. But whereas attacking APIs, they tend to give up and move on more quickly. But it's easier to attack because, like you say, we took all of the difficulty of web scraping out of the equation and said, here's a programmatic interface. Just point your bot at it. It's
We generally
designed
have
for
some
bots.
really nice documentation online that it says exactly how to query the API and exactly some sample code. That's fantastic for attackers or bot makers.
Yeah, perfect for bots. All right, we're knocking on the end of time. So there was a couple of things that came up in the last month that we didn't get to talk about here, but I'll just mention them. Some processor vulnerabilities that were disclosed. So Ghost Race and IPI storming, which affects x86 platforms, and Go Fetch that affect the Apple M silicon. They're both really interesting pieces of research. They both build on the problems of speculative execution, which we saw back in 2018 with Spectrum Meltdown. I wrote extensively about them in This Week in Security, which will probably be published by the time you're watching this video. So, or listening to this podcast. So, if you want to know more about those, you can go read about them there. And on that note, we are pretty much up to time. So, just left to thank Dave and Malcolm for joining me and talking through the news. It's been
Thanks, Aaron. Pleasure
entertaining as always.
Yeah. Thanks very much.
And on that, then, it's back to Aubrey.
Well, thank you guys. Riveting, as always. I absolutely love it. So many things that we didn't get to talk about. Maybe we'll pick up on some of those a little bit later. And as Aaron said, This Week in Security, if you're not checking it out, make sure you check out community.f5.com, right? That is DevCentral. And you can subscribe and get all the latest This Week in Security data as well. So now we're going to shift back to the AI and API stuff, away from the AI and API stuff we just did. And I'm going to bring in a conversation that I had, and this is just a sneak preview. Okay, there's actually a full 15-minute chunk, and actually the conversation was so good in this talk, I didn't even edit. I really didn't. I didn't edit things out. We just talked naturally, and there was a lot to be said about the conversation. So I'm joined by one other F5er, Cameron Delano, but we've got Dan Barahona again, who you just saw at the beginning of the show, and Corey Ball. And if you don't know who Corey Ball is at this point, you should. So Google it if you are so inclined. And on that, please check out our AI API security panel.
Well, all right. I guess thank you guys for coming to chat with me today. It's nice. We got a good conversation here. A little bit about AI and API security, right? How that's going to, I guess, change as we've seen a whole lot of change. I think last year I was at RSA, and then the year before Black Hat. And the funny thing for me was at Black Hat, everything was about API security. It was like, holy cow, API security. You couldn't go 5 feet without hearing it. And then, by RSA, API security was definitely still a thing, but people were just nonstop AI security. I remarked that I heard the term generative every 10 seconds, and I'd never, you never hear that word anywhere else, but now it's a thing. And I guess someone also said that, AI security is it's like the new skinny jeans. So, can you care to comment on that, Cameron?
Sure. So similar to, how it was a couple of years ago, blockchain and everything like that, we like to focus on whatever's new and exciting. And that's the technology that everybody's, advertising and talking about. But underlying it is still the API, which is going to be delivering it to, the masses. It's really the thing that enables something like AI or in the case of the blockchain or skinny jeans, to actually get out to you, me, and the consumer.
I kind of wish skinny jeans had never gone out to the consumer, but I have a pair. I do.
We don't need to go there.
No, I don't think we do. Now, of course, education is your thing with APISec. So, Dan, can you talk to me a little bit about how, I guess, this whole generative AI craze has changed what you do at APISec? Or, I'd imagine there are some ways that you could incorporate AI, but how does it change how you teach?
Yeah, it's
API security.
There's a few different aspects to it. So we use various tools and platforms to help us build and run our courses, and they've got all these generative features in it, right? Like press this button and it will create a course for you and all these kinds of things, and send the emails and all that. And I have not found that useful at all, right? I think that maybe we'll watch this 20 years from now and this will seem very quaint and old fashioned, but I think like creating really high value content, there's still no substitute for raw experience and insights that you can bring as a person, right? So it hasn't changed how we create our courses or the actual production. Perhaps in the editing side and things like that, it can be helpful, but not really in terms of content. But what has changed is what we're teaching about, right? And from a security perspective, there's really two aspects here, right? We need to teach our audience about how the bad guys are leveraging AI to get smarter, increase their automation, attack you in new and different ways. So as defenders, you've got to be aware of this and how people are using AI to come after you. And then from a defender side, how can you leverage AI to protect yourself, right? And so we talk a lot about take test coverage, for example, right? So you could sit down and write 1,000 tests and spend hours and weeks and months doing it, or you can employ tools like AI that will understand your environment, your applications, and actually build, a greater level of coverage than you could ever do manually. So there are techniques for the defenders to use AI as well.
Yeah, interesting. And so are you teaching kind of both sides of that? We in security talk oftentimes about, red teamers, blue teamers, or if you're, really sophisticated, you're purple for life, right? And that's where I've been at. So do you have to approach it differently for both sides?
Yeah, I think it's really about awareness, right? And as you well know, right, there's all kinds of new guidance, and so far there's the OWASP LLM top 10 that very, very well, and there are risks in using AI in your products that you need to know about, and there are opportunities to leverage AI in your defense, right? And unfortunately, there's only one Corey ball, but every company should have multiple Corey balls to help keep them safe. But maybe AI can get you some of the way there.
Yeah, and actually, Corey, that kind of brings me to you. I've been curious. I guess, how does AI change the game for hackers at this point, who are trying to actually attack, APIs? And is there a way to, I guess, utilize AI on the defensive side of that? Are we seeing that?
Yeah, definitely. It's changed the landscape in the fact that now we have this new tool that we can leverage. Organizations can leverage it on their end to help defend and detect. Attackers can leverage it to help generate new payloads, help obfuscate malicious code. It's really good at digging through huge piles of data and finding things. So for me, with API security, you can leverage custom GPT to dig through a bunch of endpoints and find the ones that are dealing with the most sensitive data and pull those out to focus on those for testing. The other way it's really changing things is that there are developers out there that are using AI to program. And so the more you interact with the code that's developed by LLMs, the more you see that security is not a current focus. And so when that code is being deployed, now we're going to see a whole new wave of vulnerable applications that are being deployed. Or, if they're working on a portion of a larger application at a larger company, then you're going to see these new vulnerabilities popping up there as well.
Okay, so as I mentioned, that is a sneak preview of the 15 minutes. That goes on for, 9 more minutes. So if you're doing the math, that's 2/5 of the interview. You can find that on the DevCentral YouTube if you're looking for it and you don't know where that is. It's youtube.com/DevCentral. And it should be right near the top in our new videos. So I guess that kind of wraps it up. I want to say thanks again to Dave, to Malcolm, and to Aaron. As always, these guys are formative. Say thank you again, Sander, for everything. It was great doing this show with you, and I can't wait to see you out there in the field somewhere. And of course, thanks to Corey and Dan and Cameron, who we'll be seeing much more of. Actually, I think Cameron and Dan are going to try to put on an API segment, like a short segment every month, just to kind of teach the community something useful about API security. So with that one, I guess you know the drill. Click like and subscribe and all those things, and we will see you next month.
Thanks for checking out This Month in Security, a DevCentral podcast. If you liked it, please tell a friend and click that like button. Of course, hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all the latest information between now and the next episode of This Month in Security.